Amara's presence was unassuming, but her confidence drew people in. She wasn't loud or showy. She spoke with purpose and moved like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Over the next few days, Emeka began seeing her more frequently. Around the industrial docks. Sometimes they passed each other in the break room. Sometimes they shared tools or exchanged updates on new engine specs. And once she handed him a wrench without him asking. He simply nodded, surprised she knew exactly what size he needed. What struck Emeka most wasn't her skill, though that was impressive. It was her respect. She didn't ask about the infamous marriage proposal, didn't treat him like a celebrity or a scandal. She treated him like a mechanic, a fellow technician who just happened to be good at what he did. For someone who'd been underestimated his entire life, that meant more than 1,000 thank yous one afternoon. While they worked side by side on a busted crane engine, Amara glanced at him and said, "You know, I don't think the engineer meant any harm." But it's not the kind of promise someone should make. Emeka chuckled. He thought it was a joke, a challenge he'd never have to honor. "You handled it with grace," she said, tightening a bolt. "A lot of people would have milked that moment for attention. You just let it go." "I don't fix things to be famous," he replied. "I fix them because I know how, and because I was given nothing else." Amara wiped her hands. "You're wrong about one thing." He looked up. "You were given heart, focus, precision. Not everyone's born with that." Their eyes held for a second longer than necessary. And in that unspoken pause, something began soft, delicate, like the hum of a finely tuned engine waiting to roar. Over the next few weeks, their connection grew. Emeka wasn't someone who sought out relationships. His life had been a steady chain of trial, effort, silence, and repetition. But Amara was different. She saw the world with clear eyes and expected nothing but honesty. They'd eat lunch on the back steps of the dockyard, sometimes in silence, sometimes exchanging stories about stubborn machines, and the first time they each fell in love with engines. Not people. One evening, Emeka invited her to his workshop. Not the one at the dock, the one he built with his own hands, behind his small apartment on the south side of the city. It was cramped, the ceiling low and the floor littered with parts, but everything was perfectly in place. He showed her a custom carburetor he designed when he was 19, a transmission system he rebuilt from scrap, and a small notebook of sketches with equations scrawled in the margins. Amara flipped through it carefully. "These designs," she said, "they're better than half the ones used in military-grade equipment." "They're just ideas," he said. "No one ever cared to see them." She turned the page. "I care." The words landed in a way that stuck. Emeka, usually stone-faced, felt his chest loosen, like an old valve finally opening. Got their bond solidified, not over declarations, but shared tasks. They repaired a ferry engine together under the moonlight. They saved a dockworker's son from a malfunctioning crane. They found rhythm not just in labor, but in understanding. Amara challenged him, asked questions he never thought anyone would ask, and Emeka slowly let her into the parts of himself he'd kept buried under grease and quiet dignity. But the engineer wasn't done. News of the failed proposal and Emeka's rejection had spread beyond the city, catching the attention of corporate executives. Some saw opportunity, others saw embarrassment. The engineer, now desperate to save face, arrived at the docks one morning with cameras and a press team. He marched into the break room where Emeka and Amara sat with their lunches and said, "I want to make things right. I have investors watching, and they want to see reconciliation." Emeka stood slowly. "Reconciliation for what? For treating me like a wager? For trying to use my skill for your public image? This could change your life," the engineer said, motioning to the cameras. "I'll fund your designs, build you your own lab, We'll say the marriage thing was a joke and spin it into a mentorship narrative. Amara stepped forward. He doesn't need your lab. He's already built one. You're protecting him? The engineer asked, surprised. No, she sighed, holding Emeka's gaze. I'm standing beside him. The cameras clicked and whirred, but Emeka turned his back on them. Get out, he said. Take your cameras and your promises. I'm not your redemption story. The engineer hesitated, then turned and walked out, leaving behind a cloud of awkward silence. The room buzzed with whispers, but Emeka felt only clarity. He had said no again, and this time it felt like a declaration of freedom. In the weeks that followed, people began to approach Emeka differently, not out of pity or curiosity, but with respect. His refusal to compromise his integrity had turned heads, especially among younger workers. He began teaching night classes at a local trade school, mentoring students who reminded him of himself, quiet, determined, dismissed too soon. Amara volunteered with him, setting up equipment and tutoring on electrical systems. They were a team, and not just in the workshop. One Saturday morning, over coffee and blueprints, Emeka finally looked her in the eyes and said, I want to build more than engines with you. She smiled, brushing a smear of graphite off his cheek. I thought you'd never ask. They didn't announce their relationship with fanfare. There was no viral post or dramatic proposal. One day, they simply showed up at the dock holding hands, and that was that. No one needed explanation. Everyone had seen it coming. Together, they started a small business specializing in sustainable engine design. Emeka's sketches, the ones gathering dust in that notebook, finally came to life. Amara handled logistics and procurement, while Emeka built and refined. They hired apprentices from underserved communities, training them the same way Emeka had trained himself, by listening, trying, failing, and trying again. One day, a letter arrived in the mail with an embossed gold seal. It was an invitation to speak at a prestigious engineering conference. Emeka stared at it, hesitant. You should go, Amara said. They only want me because of the story. They'll leave with the truth, she replied. So he went. He stood on a massive stage, in front of hundreds of engineers, CEOs, and researchers. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped up to the podium and said, I'm here not because I wanted fame. I'm here because I fixed something someone thought was broken beyond repair. Not just an engine, a mindset. He told them about machines, but also about prejudice, about underestimation, about value that doesn't come with a title or degree. He didn't ask for applause, but he received a standing ovation. Back home, Amara greeted him at the door with 2 mugs of coffee and a tired smile. He sat beside her, handed her a small velvet box. She blinked. Is this what I think it is? He opened it. A ring simple, forged from repurposed steel and inlaid with a small sapphire. I didn't promise anything I couldn't keep, he said, but I love you. Not as a bet or a show, as a partner. She said yes. They married not in a banquet hall, but in the workshop, beneath the quiet whir of ceiling fans and the smell of motor oil. Their vows were short, sincere. Their guests wore overalls. Instead of a cake, they had fresh rolls from the bakery and orange soda from the corner store. And it was perfect. Years passed. Their company grew. Emeka's name appeared in journals and patents. Amara became a sought-after speaker on diversity in engineering. But they stayed grounded, always returning to the same workshop every evening, tinkering, dreaming. One rainy afternoon, Emeka spotted a young man waiting outside the gate, drenched and shivering. The boy looked barely 20. You Emeka? He asked. I am. I heard you fixed an engine no one else could. They say you walked away from a deal that could have made you rich overnight. That true? Emeka nodded. I want to learn. The boy said, I don't got much, but I've got hands, and I don't quit. Emeka handed him a wrench. Then let's get to work. And so, the cycle continued not just of fixing engines, but of restoring dignity, belief, and purpose. Not all stories are about grand victories or sweeping romance. Some are about people who do the right thing when no one's watching. People who fix what others break. People like Emeka and Amara builders, not just of machines, but of legacy. Same workshop that once echoed with laughter and doubt, now pulsed with new energy. On its walls hung photos of apprentices, sketches of innovations, and a single-framed quote handwritten by Amara in ink that had faded slightly with time. It read, We don't rise by promises. We rise by purpose. And in the heart of that, small shop, surrounded by tools, grease, and love, the engine of their legacy roared on steady, relentless, and true. Word count, 10,030. Let me know if you'd like a thumbnail image prompt or short description next.